Well, we call this session, at Greg's encouragement, the most useful management tool I know. But that is actually true. I do believe that. I have used this technique known as situational leadership myself, both in my professional career and thereafter, to very good effect. So I hope that you will also find it useful. The very first time that I took it, it was a 2-day course, folks, and I am compressing 2 days into, an hour and a quarter, something like that. So it is of necessity cut very short, I'm afraid, which means that there's a whole lot left out. But there is quite a bit of literature around on this. I encourage you to take it further and study it. Today, I will only really be able to give you the very basics of what this is about. It is, in my mind, a really useful way to lead people. So, without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so the first question really is, what's your preferred leadership style? You probably have a favorite way of leading people. Is it directing, coaching, supporting, or delegating? I don't ask you to have to answer that question right now, but just think about it for a moment or two. The thing about situational leadership is this. We believe that real leadership is not using what you are most comfortable with, what your preferred style is, but actually thinking more about what leadership your team members actually need. Not what you prefer, but what they need. Which I suggest is as close as you can get to servant leadership, which I will refer to at the end of our time, but which is what Jesus clearly did. So before we start thinking about leadership and leadership styles, we actually need to think about the team members and what they most need. So we're going to start out thinking about the team members rather than about the leader, because actually that's where it all starts. So we'll focus on the team members first. And to do that, I'm going to use various terms that I want you just to become familiar with. And one of them is this. You want to figure out what is that team member's task-specific readiness, which is how ready are they to do a particular task? How equipped, how willing and able are they to do that? And to do that, we try to assess, first of all, their skill. What kinds of things would contribute to a person's skill, do you think? The start point actually is aptitude. Do they have an aptitude for it? If I were recruited to work in a role which involved design and art, I would be hopeless because I have no aptitude for that. If it involved words, that would be fine because that's my aptitude. So, first of all, aptitude. Secondly, as we said, education. What's your educational level relative to this? How ready are you for this task based on your education? Training, which tends to be something that's more specific. Education can be fairly broad. It can be an arts degree or a science degree. But the training is, generally speaking, specific to what it is you're being asked to do. And, of course, as we said, experience. All of those contribute to a person's skill. And we might think of it in terms of being low or high in each case, resulting in how skilled are they, and the second, which is what we can call will. In other words, how much do they want to do this? How much are they motivated to do it? So will or motivation. Just to recap, what we're thinking about is this task-specific readiness, their readiness to undertake a particular task. And the two contributing elements to that are skill and will, or motivation. So, what kinds of things would contribute to motivation or will? First of all, there's drive. How much do I really want to achieve this thing? So a sense of ambition or something like that that wants you to make you do it. The second would be incentive. What incentive is there for me to want to do this? For a salesman's job, for instance, a salesperson's job, they generally get a bonus or a commission based on how much they sell. Probably in Christian work, we don't have all that many financial incentives, but we have some other incentives, don't we? And those are the kinds of things that will drive us on to try and achieve those things. Security, which is what you were talking about. How secure does somebody feel? Or, as you put it, how insecure? Fear. So if somebody is full of fear, they're probably their willingness to take risks and try to do things is going to be pretty low. And we'll think about that some more. And then finally, you talked really about that question of somebody having it delegated to them. Do they understand what it is that's required of them? Their role understanding. Two elements, two things that contribute to somebody's readiness to perform a specific task. I keep coming back to this specific task because we're not evaluating a person. We're evaluating their ability to perform a particular task. And so somebody who has been, for instance, a children's teacher in a primary school, and they come to your church and you're wondering whether they would be good, if they want to volunteer for some activity, and you think, well, they would probably be great working with the children. Probably. They've got experience, they've had some training and so on. We would then be thinking about them in relation to a children's worker. But what if you were thinking, what we really need is a bookshop manager? You'd have to think it's the same person, but we're having to assess their readiness to do that job based on these criteria, and that will tell us something about how ready they are. I mean, just off the top of your head, you'd probably say they're very, very ready to do the children's worker job, but they're probably not very ready to do the bookshop manager job. We're going to get a little bit more scientific than that and think about how we do that. So when I'm thinking about these kinds of things, I want to try to identify where somebody stands in relation to these things. I want to emphasize, I want to underline that this is not evaluating somebody as a person. It's not saying they're a good person or a bad person. It's not saying whether I like them or I don't like them. It has nothing to do with that. What it's saying is, how ready are they to do the job that I need done here? Or to do the job that they have been recruited for. So, taking somebody and thinking about them, thinking about that primary school teacher, we might ask ourselves, now, how skilled are they? Well, we know that they probably got the education and the training and probably the experience to do that. They're probably pretty good on the skill side. Yeah? We don't know about experience of teaching children from Scripture or how long they've been a Christian, or those sorts of things. But so we would rate them in one of these areas on their skill level. R1 means right at the start. They're very low on that. R2 would mean they're a bit better than that, a bit higher. They've got a bit more ability in this area. They're a bit more skill. R3, fairly high. And for R4, they are as good as we could get in the area of skill. Will, on the other hand, was those things that we were talking about. Let me turn this back so that we've got our key. So we've got drive, incentive, security, and role understanding. So that teacher might not have all that much understanding of what's expected of him or her. Security, probably not governed by fear too much in this role, but fear of failure, perhaps. Incentive, well, there's no particular bonus except a word from the Lord saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant," which is a pretty good incentive. Drive, we don't know. So we'd have to put a question mark on that, perhaps, for the moment. Passion is a good word, a good synonym for that. Yeah? A real desire to do it. So what we might say is that the person might be high on the skill side, but low on the will side, we probably reckon. And that would help us to understand where they stand in their readiness to take on the job of children's worker in our church. The R1 person, the person who is really at the lowest end of readiness to do this job, they would be low skill and low will, probably, right? What do you suppose R4? High and high. So what we can probably expect is that these two will be another way around. That's the difficult thing to figure out. So what this is, the R3 person has developed the skills, but hasn't yet developed the will to take it on. The R2 person hasn't yet developed the skills, but is keen to go on growing and developing. So they are actually up here. This is just a useful way of thinking about how we assess a person's readiness. The takeaway from this is R1 low on all counts, R4 high on all counts, and R3 and R2 a mixture of those things, of skill and will. And in one case, the skills have been developed. It's easier to develop skill in a sense than will, but it takes time. And in the case of will, people can be eager and keen to do something, but they may not be so keen to take on responsibility. What we've done here is we've tried to identify where the person stands in terms of readiness to do a job. And I'm going to now ask you to have a little go at assessing somebody's readiness. Now, obviously, in a real-life situation, back in your own organization, you wouldn't just be basing your assessment on a 3 or 4 minute question and answer session. You would have a whole lot more data, wouldn't you? We're not just talking about recruitment interviewing, we're talking about somebody who may be in your organization, but which perhaps you're asking to take on a role, or which you're trying to think whether they should. And so as to give them the right kind of leadership, we're trying to assess how ready are they to take this task on. So you would base it on a lot of different things. You'd have their job history, you'd know what their education was, perhaps from their records. You would have a lot of information about those kinds of things, and you'd be able to make an assessment. But it also helps to talk to the person to find out how they feel about things, because while you might be able to assess skill from the records, will might be a whole lot different. And that will require some conversation, probably, and certainly some interaction over maybe over a little while. The question is, how ready are you to do this job? Because how ready you are will tell me as leader how I need to lead you. Because I want to lead you in the way that you most need. So let's talk about that a little bit now. So we've talked about the team member. When there's a job that needs to be done, in other words, that's a task that we need performed, then the leader needs to bring what's called task behavior. And the kinds of things that are task behavior, task-oriented, if you like, are things like tell, show how to do it, explain how to do it. This is the way I want you to do it. This is the job. This is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to do it. Explain, reinforce, follow it up, and correct. When it goes wrong, say, no, stop a minute. This is how I want you to do it. Do it this way. Now, I'm doing it in the most simple, just thinking about a manual task or something like that, or a computer task. I'm showing how to do it. But just to explain how it's at the most simple level. That's task behavior. Tell, show, explain, reinforce, correct, rebuke, put right, start again, all of these things. That's task behavior. When we want to build a person's morale up, to help them to feel good, then we use what's called relationship behavior. Task behavior to tell them how to do a task, relationship behavior to help them to feel good. Relationship behavior is the kinds of things that you see there. Encourage, praise, support. In other words, that means help. Involve them. In other words, open something up for them to participate and affirm what they're doing. Task, relationship, task, relationship. And the question is really, how much of each of those to use in each different situation? The answer is, and what the approach that we bring to it in this in what I'm calling what we call situational leadership is, depending on the situation, we're going to apply a particular leadership style. In other words, we don't go simply with our preferred style all the time. What we do is we bring to that leadership task, we bring the style that is most necessary for that person at that time, given their task-specific readiness. So let me explain what that means. We're going to apply, as far as we can, the right combination of relationship and task orientation to the way we do it. Task behavior builds up the person's skill at doing something, and in building up their skill, it builds up their confidence. Whereas relationship behavior helps improve motivation and confidence. So both behaviors build up confidence. But task behavior especially builds up confidence because it helps the person to get better at what they're doing. Whereas relationship behavior reassures them that they're on the right track. Does that make sense? So, summing it up, leadership, situational leadership matches the leadership style that we use to the team member's specific readiness for that task.
You're not talking about team as a team.
I'm not talking, at this point, I'm not talking team, I'm talking individual. Yeah, it can be applied to teams, but that adds a much greater level of complexity. So to keep it simple at this stage, and you will be able to think yourself how to apply it to a team. But for the moment, think one person. And that we're trying to think, and you may like to think of this in relation to a person in your workplace, in your organization that you are responsible for. How should I be leading them? What do they most need from me? And the answer is it depends on where they are in relation to the task that they're doing. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So, matches the leadership style to the team member's task-specific readiness. The aim is always, through this, to bring that team member to their maximum readiness as quickly as possible. So that if they're really a beginner at the moment, we want to get them to expert as quickly as we can, consistent with doing it well. And that leadership style that we apply will change depending on that person's progress through these different stages. It changes to meet the different needs in different situations at different levels of readiness. And of course, with different people, because they're going to be at different levels of readiness. As we said, changes to meet different needs and different situations. Let me sum it up this way. Leadership behavior combines those task and relationship activities or approaches, which in the way that people most need. Let's think about this first of all. If we think about it in this four-box matrix, which I find a useful way of thinking about things. Down here is task behavior. Remember task behavior? That's tell, show, explain, correct. Low to high. In other words, how much am I giving it of them? And on the other axis, relationship behavior. Remember, that's encourage, support, coach, help, affirm, and so on. Praise, low to high. Now, over here in this quadrant, high task and low relationship. So what this would be saying, it's not saying no relationship. It doesn't mean being mean or unkind or nasty to somebody, but it's saying this behavior here, high task, low relationship, it's giving them lots of instruction, if you like. It shows them how to do it. It explains again if need be. And it tells them, it sets them going. It winds them up and sets them off along the road. That's this quadrant here. High task, low relationship. It doesn't mean that we're being nasty. It just means that we're not taking time all the time to say, yes, I'm sure you can do this. You'll be great. Because actually that's not much use to them. What they really want to know is, how do I do this? So that's what I'm giving them. They need to know what's expected of me and how do I do it. And actually most of us would value that in most of the things we do, provided we know that. We call this, obviously, directing. And that sums it up. That's what it is. Up here on the next quadrant, high task and high relationship. So we're still doing quite a bit of telling and showing and explaining, but probably not as much as we were before. But now, as we see progress on those technical skills or on the things that are needed to do the job, we're starting to say, that's great. You're starting to get it. Well done. Now let's try it again. Can you see a better way of doing it than you're doing it? That's inviting participation. That's relationship behavior. That's opening it up to them. So this high task and high relationship, which we call S Style 2. Style 1, style 2 is coaching. And coaching involves a certain amount of telling and showing and explaining, but also a certain amount of affirming and encouraging and praising. And then over into the next one. Low task and high relationship. Low task means I don't have to keep now explaining and telling and showing because that person's getting it. But it's high relationship because it's affirming, encouraging, opening up to participation, inviting involvement in how something is done. So it's lower task, but high relationship. And that's S3, which we call supporting. It's essentially saying this person is now fairly ready for the task. You can see over there. But perhaps they're not quite yet ready to take on the responsibility for it entirely themselves. So they need some support. And that's S3, supporting. And then finally, low task and low relationship. Again, I insist, not no relationship, but low relationship. We're not having to constantly affirm and praise and encourage. And we're certainly not having to tell and show and explain, because we assume that that can be done. And that's S4, and we call that delegating. Putting it all together, down here we've got the readiness levels, right? R1, R2, R3, and R4. Over there. R1, low, low. R2, low, high. R3, high, low. And R4, high, high. Over here. And up here we've got the leadership styles, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the way that it works is like this. For the R1 person, or the one who, I say person, I don't mean they're an R1 person, they are R1 for this task. Let's take your example of a team leader. You've had somebody who's been part of the team, and now you want them to be team leader. On day one, I suggest they are probably at R1 level. They haven't had experience at doing it before. And although they know the jobs that people do, they don't know how to lead the team yet. So they are R1. They're probably nervous about it, a bit scared. What if I make a mess of this? So their will level is relatively low. So we give them S1 leadership, which is high task, high relationship. This is how you do it. I need to give you I need to show you how to do this well. What we're doing is showing them how to do it, because actually the best way to improve their confidence is by telling them how to do it. And as they start to get it and come on up, we start to reduce the task, it's moving in this direction, and increase the encouragement and praise and so on. Do you see? And as we get into this quadrant, as they develop that competence more, so we find that we don't have to give them so much of that tell and show and explain, but we do have to encourage and open up for their participation in the process. Give them more scope, and that's part of relationship behavior. And as we go on into this quadrant, we're really cutting into the low part of the task behavior for the R3 person. We're still needing to give them quite a bit of encouragement and affirmation to take on the responsibility. Because we think of them a little bit like that baby bird, if you like, that's in the nest. And they've grown their feathers, and they have the innate skill to fly, but at the moment they're pretty scared about flying. And that's the team leader who's got to this position. They understand what's needed. They've been told, they've been shown, they've been explained everything. But now they need to be encouraged to take responsibility. And we come into this quadrant and we give it to them. And we've completely dropped away the task behavior. We're no longer telling them how to do it. We're really just affirming, encouraging, supporting. And there we go. It's delegated to them. So that curve really tries to think about the relationship between the team members' readiness to do a job and my style that I need to bring to the task of managing, of leading them. Looking at it another way. Down here on this axis, you've got the R1, 2, 3, and 4. The R1, the very low readiness. So the style that we need to bring to the readiness level 1 is style 1, S1. The R1, the person who is R1 for a task needs S1 leadership, high task, low relationship. The R2 needs style 2 relationship, style 2 task and relationship, right? Style 2 is high task, high relationship. Style 3 for the R3 and style 4 for the R4. Let me show you what it feels like if you apply S4 up here to the person who is R1. So that's the brand new team leader. And I say to them, you're going to be great. I have absolutely no doubt about it. You've really got what it takes. Bye-bye. That's what it feels like when I say, off you go. And equally, for the R4 person, if I give them S1 leadership, the person who's high skill and high will, and I say to them, now this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it, let me explain again. Have you got it? They're saying, listen, I've been doing this for years. Why would I need that kind of instruction? You say, well, I just want to make sure that you know what it is that I expect of you. This is what I want from you. Let me show you again. It's a quick way to make somebody feel very irritated. Basically, the idea is that we want to match the leadership style to the readiness level of the team member. So, I think I probably have to bring it to a close there. Thank you very much for your patience.